What you're about to hear is from a radio show back in the 90s on a station that went by the name of Kiss FM in the beautiful region of Algarve, Portugal. Listen carefully.
O mais recente single da Ronnie Jordan no número 30 da contagem, o tema Under Your Spell. Bom, e seguimos em frente na escalada que nos vai levar ao topo do top. No número 29, desceram do número 21, estão os New Order, do álbum New Republic, o tema World. I turn sideways to the sun, keep my thoughts from...
Yes, this is the 90s, and here I am. I am 17 years old, and I'm doing what I love the most, hosting a radio show. And in case some people watching this TED Talk don't understand Portuguese, well, in fact, you don't have to, because basically I'm naming the songs, Ronnie Jordan, New Order, One Republic. You don't have to understand Portuguese to see that I sound a bit strange. I sound weird. My voice is two tones, and I'm too formal. And even if you knew me back then, you would realize that the person behind the microphone has nothing to do with the real me, especially back then. I was 17 years old. How could I be so formal and so tense? Now, what happened was that after this show, on a beautiful Sunday afternoon in the Algarve, my director called me to his office, and we went through a process that on a regular job goes by the name of feedback. And it's okay, right? You improve when you receive feedback from a superior of yours. Well, on the radio, this process is called hair checking. And it consists of this. Your director checking every single thing you say on the radio. And this director, I can tell you, he wasn't tender at all. He said I was too plastic. He said I was trying to imitate all the great voices I used to listen to on national radio stations. And in fact, I was, because they were superstars. And I wanted to be like them. I wanted to have that voice. It was a hard conversation, yes. But at the middle of that conversation, he also gave me one of the best advices I have ever received so far. And I want to share that advice with you today. He said something like, if you're not ready to sound like you, keep the microphone off. I thought about this for a long, long time. If you're not ready to be yourself, keep the mic off. This conversation, this hair-shaking moment was on my mind. I was in love with the radio. I wanted so much to work. I wanted to have a career. So I started to think, what could I do differently in order to improve my performance on the air? And I started to reflect on this. So at a certain point, instead of focusing so much on my voice, and instead of being so careful about the words that would come out of my mouth, I changed my style. I let go of this supposed perfection. It wasn't perfection at all. And I started to talk like a real person, like me. And guess what? In the middle of all those voices I was trying to imitate, there I was. I had a voice. So I started to talk about me, about subjects I was interested in, about people around me, about things that matter. And I realized as I moved forward on my career, I left this local radio station meanwhile. I came to Lisbon. By the age of 23, I got this beautiful job on a national radio station. It was my dream come true. I'm still in this communication group today. And I found out that as I was moving forward on my career, that people would connect with something very specific I would do. No one ever told me, oh, I turned on the radio because I love your deep voice. But people would say, I turned on the radio because I love your stories. I remember your grandmother's story that you told months ago. I remember your kid's story. So yes, people connect to stories, I've realized. Now, we all have a microphone, don't we? You don't have to be a radio presenter to have a voice, to have an audience. We all want to make an impact in the world with our ideas, projects, with who we are, and the way we communicate that, it's critical. So let me tell you a bit more about this strategy that I found on the radio, but it can be anywhere and you can use it. You know the problem that I find today? I find that a lot of people haven't found their real voice yet. And because of that, they are losing opportunities. Today, I'm a radio host. I do my show every morning on this national radio station, but I am also a communication trainer. I train people to communicate in a way that they connect to their audiences. And imagine, I say a lot of times, I train people to be authentic. Because one of the main problems I find is lack of authenticity when we communicate, especially when we grow up. We get adults, we leave university, we get our first job, we get into the corporate world, and we find so many information and data and meetings and presentations and PowerPoints, and it's so hard to find the real person there. We stop revealing ourselves. We stop being authentic. So let's figure out a way how to be real and a way to connect in order to reveal who we are, our ideas, and our projects. And stories, well, stories build a bridge between you and someone else. Imagine, you meet someone right now. If this person tells you a story, a childhood memory, a story with her family or his family, 10 minutes later only, you'll feel like you've known him or her for months or maybe years. And science explains this. When we tell a story, at least two things happen. We release cortisol, the attention hormone, the chemical that keeps us focused. We want to know how the story ends. And we release oxytocin. It's the social hormone. It's the chemical that gives us the sense of belonging. So science explains, and science somehow defends, we should tell more stories. Social scientists, they say that stories can change brain chemistry, and because of that, we are more likely to change our perceptions and behavior. So why don't we do it? When I train people, when I train students for a job interview, or a leader to make a presentation in front of the team or the board, I always find some resistance, as if stories didn't belong there. Why should I tell about me on a job interview? They want to know about my CV. Why should I tell about my stories? Yes, you should. Why should I tell my stories to the board? Yes, they belong there. So resistance number one is, should I tell a story? And once this obstacle is overcome, I find another problem. People tell me, how do I do it? How do I tell stories in a compelling way so that I can keep the interest and the attention of my audience along the way? Well, to solve that problem, I've designed a process. It's a method. It's called Hashem Method. It has my name on it. So if this doesn't work out, no one else is to blame, just me. Talk to me, okay? 5 letters, 5 steps in order to collect your stories, categorize those stories, because I believe every story underlines an important message, and finally applying them, okay? Those are the 3 main steps, but let's go. There's 5 steps. I'm telling you about the 3 main, but let's see one by one. Recall. You can do this on a wedding, at a bar with friends. You can do on a family Sunday lunch. You choose. It's therapy. So on this step, you start to recall moments, events in your life where you've struggled, but you survived, you stayed stronger. Where are those events? You can recall people that were or are part of your life. They somehow, you were influenced by them. Where are they? Telling those people's stories will tell your audience, what do you stand for? What are your values? See, I am moved by my grandmother's example. So at this stage of the method, what I do is recalling moments with her, conversations we had on the backyard, situations that were a mark to me. This is really therapy. So by the end of this step, you'll have plenty notes around. It's like it's a brainstorming with your life. You play, actually, the movie of your life so far. Okay, now that you have recalled, let's go to step number 2, organize. And we should ask, okay, now that you've recalled some events, ask this: what kind of stories can those events that you have recalled produce? I believe that during our lives, we will need 3 types of stories: personal stories, product stories, and alignment stories. Now, personal stories are meant to reveal who you are, the person you are, how you deal with the conflict, how you deal with the world. Telling stories, personal stories on a job interview should be mandatory, but it's not. But they do say more about you than your CV. Then product stories are about projects and ideas that you have along the way, but they have a beginning. They began, I don't know, maybe on the beach, maybe in a garden, maybe during a ride with friends. Craft those stories and don't forget them. You have to be aware, otherwise you lose it. Product stories are not exclusive of marketing teams. Everyone has ideas. And finally, alignment stories are stories to tell us why are we together on this team, in this organization, but as a family as well. So they're very powerful to unify. Okay, now C. Now, the third step you have recalled, you have organized, is crafting the story. And you will need to know that a story has a sequence, okay? 2 ideas about crafting a story. You write it down. You don't need to write a big script, but you write it down. Story has a sequence. How it was before, what happened, what changed, as simple as that. We don't stay the same when we tell a story. And a story should have some elements to spice it up. A person, a moment, emotion. How did you feel? Details to make it visual so that we can remember your story long after you have told it. Suspense, don't say everything right away. You must keep the interest of your audience. And then finally, a lesson learned, a takeaway, okay? Craft your story based on that. Then you need to humanize. You know, it's a story about you, but at the end of the day, it's a story about all of us. You know the story from the beginning, the hair check story? It's a story about me and a day that I really struggled. But at the end of the day, it's a story about how can we all have a voice. So humanize, find the universal truth of the moment that you're recalling. And finally, apply it. It's so important, this step. You know, I know a lot of people who learn the process, they'll learn how to tell stories, but they don't compromise. They don't tell it because they are afraid. You don't need to be brave to tell your stories. You know, my mentor, my storytelling mentor, Doug Stevenson, he always says this. Storytelling is like bungee jumping. You don't get to kind of jump. You don't stop in the middle of it. Just go ahead. Tell your stories and enjoy the process and enjoy the impact you have on your audience, because it really, really makes a difference. As I told you, I am moved by my grandmother's example. She was a great woman. I remember conversations we had in the backyard, and she told me about this boy, a boyfriend she used to have, not my grandfather, okay, before they met. They were together, they were so in love, but family didn't want the marriage, so they got separated. And yeah, she married my grandfather. This man married someone else. They raised families. And many years later, when no one else was expecting, this man comes from the north of Portugal to the south and asks my grandmother to marry him. She was a widow, he was too. And they got married. But my family didn't want the wedding again. Can you imagine this? They thought they're out of their minds. They were too old to marry. But my grandmother stood up against those voices. They got married, and they lived so happy for 12 long years. I tell my grandmother's story because it reveals a lot about my grandmother's character, but also reveals a lot about me. What are my values? What do I stand for? So this is my idea to you. Include your stories in your communications, and you will connect. In these pandemic times that we're living in, you know, I hope you have realized by now that it's not a screen that keeps us distant from another human being. It's not this remote communication contest we're living in. It's how you communicate that matters. And I have no doubt on this. If you choose to tell your stories, you will definitely connect. Thank you.